When my daughter was 5, she spent a week visiting my father. During her stay, he gave her an old iPhone to play with and found it amusing that she spent the entire week pretending to talk to someone. Near the end of her visit, she handed him the phone and he played along, greeting the imaginary person. To his surprise, it turned out to be a 911 operator. She'd been calling them all week for chats. They weren't upset, but informed him that even deactivated iPhones can still make 911 calls. I worked dispatch for a district spanning 200 square miles with fewer than 70,000 residents, so even the primary city wasn't very crowded. One night, a man called 911 asking for animal control. The exchange went like this. Caller, there's a raccoon. Me, where's the raccoon? I assumed it might be trapped somewhere so we could send someone to help. Caller, it's in my front yard, up in a tree. Me, sir, that's typically where raccoons live. Caller, but I live in the city. Raccoons shouldn't be here. Me, I don't think raccoons can read city limit signs. A man called early one morning to report a forest fire. He described how it seemed to be getting closer, then went silent for a moment before saying, "Never mind." It turned out the fire was the sun rising. He admitted he wasn't usually awake that early. A guy called 911 after getting off at the wrong train station with no money to get back. What made it frustrating wasn't just his situation, but his attitude. He was extremely rude and kept calling repeatedly, even after being informed that help was on the way. While tying up emergency lines is annoying, I'd like to stress something. If you think you might have an emergency but aren't sure if it qualifies for 911, don't hesitate. Call. Emergency services always prefer false alarms over preventable tragedies. Caller, I'd like to report a robbery. Me, can you tell me what happened? Caller, I'm at Burger King. I ordered 6 chicken nuggets, but they only gave me 5. My grandmother used to call 911 to ask the fire department to bring her milk, as she lived right next door to their station. She made these requests multiple times until the fire chief, who had known her for 30 years, gave her his personal number. He continued bringing her milk until she moved in with us. She passed away in 2004. At the time, she was in the early stages of dementia, and it was a small-town fire department. A man called in a panic, saying he was being burglarized. He explained that he'd walked to the bathroom in the middle of the night and spotted a man on the landing. Terrified, he ran back to his bedroom and called the police. 3 squad cars and a K9 unit arrived to sweep his house, but found nothing. When an officer asked where he'd seen the intruder, the man pointed to a hallway with a large, full-length mirror at the end. He had mistaken his own reflection for a burglar in the dark. Someone once called to complain that our emergency vehicle's lights and sirens at night woke up their baby, suggesting we avoid using them. Caller, there's a shark in the ocean. Me, yes ma'am, that's where sharks live. Caller, the doors to the Circle K are locked and there's no one inside. It's supposed to be open 24/7. Me, they sometimes lock up briefly if they need to use the restroom. Just wait a few minutes. Caller, I've been standing here for 10 minutes. Me, sometimes it's not just a quick bathroom break. My wonderful nephew, who has both physical and intellectual disabilities, once called 911 because the family cat had stolen his piece of chicken. Since he struggles with speech, the operators mostly heard grunts and noises as he tried to explain. When the responders arrived, they realized everything was fine and that he simply enjoyed the attention from the officers. Unfortunately, they had to teach him not to call 911 again, as he made 3 or 4 additional calls afterward just to see his new friends. I once received a call about a rat running around on a shelf in the caller's room. Let me clarify, I take my job seriously. To the person making the call, every situation feels like an emergency, and I fully respect that. However, this was the one call where I almost burst out laughing. The woman had a very thick accent, was on the verge of tears, and I was struggling to understand her. After much back and forth, she eventually spelled out M-O-U-S-E and imitated a mouse laugh, going, "Ma-he-he-he-he-he." It was so unexpected and over the top that I had to mute my line and stand up to compose myself. Her impression was incredibly vivid and completely out of nowhere. Still, she was genuinely terrified of the mouse, so we sent an officer to check the house. I stayed on the line with her, comforting her and assuring her that it was absolutely okay to call for help and that our officers would be glad to assist. A man called around 3 a.m., whispering. He explained that he and his wife had stayed up drinking, and she had fallen asleep on top of him. The issue was that she weighed over 400 pounds, while he was only 150, and he couldn't breathe or get up. The problem was complicated by the fact that they had just moved to the area from another state, so he didn't know his address. He also couldn't reach any pieces of mail and was calling from an older cell phone. This was back before smartphones were common. Figuring out that situation was quite the challenge. One caller expressed concern for his safety when leaving his house. He explained that a neighbor a few houses down had a table saw set up in their garage, and he was worried that the wind might blow the blade into his yard and injure him. A caller once reported that the moon was missing. Imagine trusting your local police department so much that you believe they have the power to locate and retrieve the moon. A man once called 911 from a payphone. Operator, 911, what is your emergency? Caller, I don't have an emergency. I didn't have a quarter, and I just want to talk to a cop. Operator, do you have $699.75? Caller, what? What are you talking about? Operator, sir, 911 is only for emergencies. Misusing the line can result in a fine. Caller, are you going to get me a cup or not? Operator, sure. He ended up getting a fine for misusing the system. Caller, there's a strange light in the sky over the harbor. Me, looking out the window at the area. "Sir, that's the moon.